The demands. The sky above Earth turned dark as massive alien warships appeared without warning. They were enormous, like floating cities, blocking the sunlight and casting eerie shadows on the ground below. People stopped in their tracks, staring at the ships in fear and confusion. The alien ships hovered over every major city: New York, London, Beijing, and dozens more. It was clear that this wasn't a friendly visit. The ships made no sound, but everyone felt their presence. It was terrifying. Soon, a loud, deep voice echoed across the world. It wasn't just on radios or TVs. It was everywhere, as if the air itself carried the sound. "We are the Zarthans," the voice declared. "We are your new masters." A hologram appeared in the sky, showing the face of their leader, Varnak. His appearance was both strange and frightening. His skin was pale and metallic, his eyes glowing like embers. He stood tall and proud, his armor shining with symbols that no human could understand. Varnak's voice was calm but cold. "Earthlings, you are weak, but we will spare you for a price. You will give us half of your planet's resources: food, water, minerals, and fuel. Deliver these to us within 7 of your days. If you refuse, your planet will burn." The message shocked the world. People panicked, unsure of what to do. News stations broadcasted the message repeatedly, and social media was flooded with videos of the alien ships. Everyone was asking the same questions. Why are they here? What do they really want? Can we fight them? In government buildings around the world, leaders gathered to discuss the situation. The United Nations called an emergency meeting, but no one had answers. Some leaders argued that Earth should surrender and save as many lives as possible. Others insisted that humanity should fight, even if the odds were against them. "They are too powerful," one leader said. "Their technology is far beyond ours. Fighting them would be suicide." "But if we give them what they want," another argued, "they'll only come back for more. We can't let them enslave us." The debate raged on, but one thing was clear: the Zarthans weren't bluffing. Their ships carried weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single blast. Humanity had seen their power before. Stories of other planets that resisted the Zarthans always ended in total destruction. Dr. Elena Cross, a brilliant scientist, was among those at the emergency meeting. She wasn't a politician, but her expertise in advanced energy technology had earned her a seat at the table. As she listened to the arguments, an idea began to form in her mind. It was risky, but it might be humanity's only chance. "We don't have to surrender," she said, standing up to address the room. "But we can't fight them with brute force. We need to outsmart them." The room fell silent as everyone turned to her. "Do you have a plan, Dr. Cross?" asked the Secretary General of the United Nations. "Not yet," she admitted, "but I believe we can create something powerful enough to stop them. We just need time." The leaders looked at one another, unsure of what to do. Time was running out, and the Zarthans' deadline loomed closer with every passing second. Meanwhile, on the streets, fear turned to anger. People began to protest, shouting that humanity should stand up to the invaders. Others prayed for salvation, hoping that a miracle would save them. Around the world, soldiers were put on high alert, but even they knew their weapons were no match for the Zarthan fleet. As the first day ended, Varnak's voice echoed again, this time filled with menace. 6 days remain. Do not test our patience." The message sent chills down everyone's spine. The Zarthans weren't here to negotiate. They had come to take, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted, or destroyed everything. The tension grew thicker with each passing hour. Humanity was at a crossroads. Would they bow to the Zarthans' demands, or would they risk everything to fight back? And if they chose to fight, would it even matter against such a powerful enemy? Dr. Cross knew that humanity's survival depended on making the right choice. And fast. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the planet hung in the balance. Humanity's decision. As the deadline approached, The world held its breath. People from every corner of the earth gathered in front of their screens, waiting for the next announcement. Would the Zarthans strike? Would humanity surrender? The tension was unbearable. In the United Nations headquarters, leaders sat in a darkened room, their faces lit only by the flickering lights of the giant monitors. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath. Some countries had already begun to prepare for the worst, while others were on the verge of giving in. The global situation was becoming more desperate by the hour. Cities were in chaos. Supplies were hoarded. Riots broke out in some places as people debated the best course of action. The demand for resources from the Zarthans was clear. Half of Earth's resources in exchange for peace. But for many, the idea of giving up so much was unthinkable. Inside the emergency meeting room, a cold silence fell as Dr. Elena Cross stood in front of a large screen displaying the images of the Zarthan ships hovering above major cities. The team of scientists and military leaders around her stared at her with a mixture of hope and doubt. This was it, the moment of decision. "We have one chance," Dr. Cross said, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Surrender means enslavement, but fighting means we risk everything. We can't win by fighting them head-on with weapons. We need a new plan, a weapon they won't see coming." Her words hit the room like a shockwave. Everyone turned to look at her. Could there be a way out? Was it possible to strike back against an enemy with such superior technology? General Mark Harris, the military leader in the room, stood up with a skeptical expression. "You're talking about doing the impossible. They've already shown us their power. You think we can just outsmart them?" Dr. Cross looked him in the eyes. "We can't fight them directly. But I've been working on something that might just work. It's not fully tested yet, but we have no choice now. We need to stop them before they destroy us." General Harris crossed his arms. "And how exactly do you expect to do that?" Dr. Cross took a deep breath and walked to the whiteboard, scribbling equations and diagrams that no one else in the room truly understood. "I've been studying advanced energy systems for years. There's a way to harness Earth's own energy, specifically the energy deep within the planet. I've developed a device that can release an electromagnetic pulse so powerful that it could disable their fleet. If we can deliver the pulse at the right moment, we can shut them down before they can react." The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Could it work? Could they really take on the Zarthans with something so untested and dangerous? "The problem is," Dr. Cross continued, "this weapon is unstable. One mistake and it could tear apart everything we've worked for. But if we don't try, we'll lose everything anyway." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The world was watching, waiting for the leaders to make a decision. Time was running out. The Zarthans had warned them. 6 days, now only 5. The deadline was a few short hours away, and the military leaders were divided. Surrender meant giving up half of the planet's resources, an impossible choice. Fighting meant risking extinction. "We have no other options," said Dr. Cross, her voice firm, cutting through the tension. "We fight with what we have. I'll need your support to get this weapon built and ready in time." General Harris exchanged a look with the other military officers. They knew the risk, but they also knew humanity had to make a stand. Finally, Harris spoke. "All right, we'll back you up, but you'll need to work quickly. We have no more time to waste." With the decision made, a new sense of urgency spread across the globe. The world's best minds and soldiers were called into action. Around the clock, teams worked to complete the device, while others focused on keeping the Zarthans distracted. The stakes had never been higher. At the same time, in hidden underground labs, Dr. Cross and her team worked tirelessly. As the minutes turned into hours, the pressure mounted. With every passing second, the Zarthan ships loomed larger in the sky, their shadows stretching across cities and entire nations. The clock was ticking. Dr. Cross sat at her desk late one night, staring at the flickering screens. The plans were coming together, but it was still a gamble. She had spent years developing this technology, but this was the first time it would be used in such a desperate situation. One mistake, and everything could fall apart. But what choice did they have? They had to believe in the impossible. Humanity's future was on the line, and they had only one chance to fight back. If Project Inferno failed, it could spell the end for the human race. Yet, if it succeeded, it might just be the weapon needed to defeat the Zarthans and force them to leave Earth. Dr. Cross glanced at the countdown clock ticking on the wall. 3 days left. "We can do this," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince herself or her team. They had no more time to waste. The hidden weapon. The days dragged on, each one feeling like a lifetime. Earth had only 3 days left before the Zarthans would make their move, and Dr. Elena Cross and her team were working tirelessly to finish Project Inferno. The pressure was immense. The fate of humanity rested in their hands. Dr. Cross knew this was more than just a weapon. It was a gamble that could either save the world or destroy it. If Project Inferno failed, not only would the Zarthans annihilate Earth, but humanity would have no way to defend itself in the future. If it succeeded, Earth would have a fighting chance. But could they perfect something so dangerous in such a short amount of time? In the underground laboratory, the atmosphere was tense. Scientists and engineers moved quickly between workstations, their faces lit by the harsh glow of screens filled with equations, schematics, and diagrams. The hum of machines and the clicking of keyboards were the only sounds in the room. Dr. Cross stood at the center of the lab, her eyes scanning the blueprints for the final component of the weapon. The core of Project Inferno was a device capable of harnessing Earth's electromagnetic field, a pulse that could disable all electronic systems within a massive radius. The energy needed for such a pulse was enormous, and the slightest miscalculation could trigger an uncontrollable chain reaction. "We need to stabilize the power core," said Dr. Cross, her voice sharp but calm. She had become the backbone of the operation, pushing her team forward even when hope seemed thin. Otherwise, the pulse could overload. "We've seen that in simulations." Her team of engineers nodded, but they were visibly worn down. They'd been working around the clock, and fatigue was beginning to show in their movements. Yet, no one dared to slow down. They had no choice but to finish. "We're running out of time," muttered Jacob, the lead engineer. "At this rate, we'll be lucky if we can get this thing operational in the next 24 hours. Dr. Cross gritted her teeth. "We can't afford to wait any longer. We can fix the stability issues after it's activated. Just make sure it works first. I need that pulse ready, now." She knew they were taking the huge risk, but it was their only option. If Project Inferno was to have any chance of success, it needed to be fired before the Zarthans launched their full-scale attack. The pulse, when activated, would disable the Zarthan fleet's advanced technology. It was a last-ditch effort to level the playing field, but whether it would work remained to be seen. Meanwhile, across the globe, the world's governments scrambled to prepare for the worst. Some nations had begun to evacuate their populations to underground bunkers. The Zarthan deadline was now just 2 days away, and no one knew what would happen when the time came. Would the aliens show mercy, or would they destroy everything in their path, as they had done to countless other planets? The military had placed all its focus on protecting vital infrastructure, but it was clear that no amount of firepower would match the Zarthans' superior technology. The only hope now lay with Project Inferno. As Dr. Cross moved through the lab, checking on the final adjustments, her mind raced. Could they really stop the alien invaders with an untested weapon? The stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined. Failure wasn't an option, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. They had one shot to turn the tide, and one tiny flaw could destroy everything. Her thoughts were interrupted by a beeping sound from the main console. Jacob looked up from his work, eyes wide with urgency. "Dr. Cross, you need to see this." She rushed over to the station, where a holographic map of the Zarthan fleet flickered on the screen. Several of their ships were beginning to move. The countdown had begun. The Zarthans were preparing to strike. "We don't have much time," Jacob said, his voice tense. "They're not waiting for the full 7 days." Dr. Cross swallowed hard. The Zarthans had grown impatient. The final countdown was here, and if Project Inferno was going to work, it had to be now. As the team scrambled to make final adjustments, the military prepared for a battle that they were ill-equipped to fight. Reports from around the world confirmed that the Zarthans were beginning their assault, sending smaller fleets into Earth's atmosphere to disable major defense systems. Dr. Cross knew that if they didn't launch the pulse soon, the Zarthans would wipe out Earth's remaining defenses and make their way toward the planet's core to seize the resources they demanded. "Activated," Dr. Cross ordered, her voice shaking with the weight of the moment. The team gathered around the central control panel. Jacob's hands hovered above the activation keys, sweat dripping down his face. The countdown was almost at 0. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's no other choice," Dr. Cross replied. With a deep breath, Jacob pressed the button. The entire facility seemed to hold its breath. The room shook as the massive power core came to life, humming with raw energy. Dr. Cross watched the readings closely, her eyes locked on the screen as the pulse built. Then, with a sudden, deafening sound, the pulse fired, a brilliant surge of energy that shot into the sky. The sky above them flickered as the pulse swept across the Earth's atmosphere, aiming directly at the Zarthan ships hovering in the distance. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the Zarthan ships trembled. Their bright lights flickered, and one by one, they began to fall from the sky. The Zarthans' advanced technology was no match for the power of Earth's electromagnetic pulse. Their ships lost all power, crashing into the ocean or into the vast, empty deserts. The fleet was disabled in an instant. But this victory came with a price. The weapon had worked, but not without consequences. The force of the pulse had overloaded parts of Earth's own power grid. Cities around the world experienced massive blackouts, and the world was plunged into darkness. Yet it didn't matter. The Zarthans were down. Humanity had taken the first step toward survival. But even as the silence settled over the world, Dr. Cross knew this was only the beginning. The Zarthans weren't finished. This was only the start of a much larger conflict. A bold bluff. The world was in chaos. The pulse from Project Inferno had crippled the Zarthan fleet, but humanity was far from safe. The alien ships lay in ruin, scattered across the Earth's atmosphere and oceans, but the Zarthans were not known for their mercy. No one knew if they would take their defeat quietly, or if they would regroup and come back stronger. Dr. Elena Cross couldn't afford to assume the latter. The pulse had bought them time, but that was all. As cities around the world plunged into darkness, the news spread like wildfire. In the midst of global panic, one thing was clear. The Zarthans had been temporarily neutralized, but their true strength remained a mystery. What if the pulse didn't destroy their fleet completely? What if they had a backup system, a hidden defense? And what if, even now, they were preparing to retaliate in a way humanity couldn't anticipate? Dr. Cross sat in the command center, her face illuminated by a map of Earth, marked with the locations of the disabled ships. The world's military leaders were scrambling to understand the extent of the damage. Had they truly destroyed the fleet, or had they only knocked out the ship's weapons and engines, leaving them vulnerable but still very much alive? In the dimly lit room, General Mark Harris spoke first. "The Zarthans are going to come back. We need to be ready for when they do." This was just the first wave. Dr. Cross nodded, her eyes locked on the map. "We don't know for sure if we've neutralized them completely. But one thing is certain. They'll be back, and we need to have a plan. If we wait for them to regroup and attack, it will be too late." A voice from the communications desk broke the silence. "We're receiving a transmission from the Zarthans. It's from their leader, Varnock." Everyone in the room froze. Varnock, the terrifying figure who had given the ultimatum. Had they come to negotiate, or was this the beginning of their revenge? The screen flickered and came to life, revealing Varnak's cold, metallic face. His eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity as he spoke, his voice deep and filled with authority. "Earthlings," he said, his tone calculated but edged with anger. "You have made a grave mistake. You have temporarily disabled our fleet, but you will pay for your insolence. I am giving you one final chance to surrender. Deliver the tribute, or we will annihilate your planet. This is your only warning." Dr. Cross's heart raced. The Zarthans had not given up. They were angry, and their next move could be catastrophic. "Do you hear that?" General Harris growled. "They're not backing down." Dr. Cross stood, her mind racing. "We can't give them what they want. We know that now. But we also can't afford to wait and play defense. We need to strike back, hard, before they regroup." The room was silent for a moment, as everyone absorbed her words. They all knew the risks. If they went on the offensive now, they could anger the Zarthans even more. But if they did nothing, it would be the end of Earth. "We don't have the power to fight them again directly," Dr. Cross continued. "But what if we could bluff? What if we made them think we still have a weapon that could destroy them?" General Harris raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we fake a weapon? You think the Zarthans are going to fall for that?" Dr. Cross hesitated, but her mind was set. "It's a risk, but it might be the only one left. If we can get the right message to Varnak, make him believe we have something even more devastating than Project Inferno, it might buy us the time we need to prepare for their next attack." The room was divided. Some wanted to push forward with their actual weapons, but others, like General Harris, were not convinced that a bluff would work. But time was running out, and they had nothing to lose. "We can use the remnants of Project Inferno," Dr. Cross said. "The Zarthans don't know how much we've disabled or how much power we still have. If we can make them believe we're holding back, they might hesitate to launch a full-scale retaliation. All we need is for them to believe we're capable of destroying them." Jacob, the lead engineer, chimed in nervously. "But how do we convince them? We don't have anything else." The pulse worked, but there's no other weapon we can threaten them with. Dr. Cross turned to him, a sudden, bold idea forming in her mind. "We don't need another weapon. We just need to make them think we do." And so, the plan began. The team quickly got to work, using every resource they had to create a decoy. They took pieces of the damaged Project Inferno, along with some of Earth's most powerful experimental technology, and began assembling a mock weapon that could look just like the one that had fired the pulse. The key was to make it look convincing, enough to make the Zarthans think that Earth had an even greater weapon in reserve. The bluff was risky. If the Zarthans discovered it was a fake, humanity could face utter destruction. But there was no turning back now. They had to buy more time, or all would be lost. As the decoy weapon was finished, Dr. Cross prepared a message for Varnak. It would be sent through a direct communication channel, one the Zarthans would have no reason to distrust. The message was simple, but its implications were clear. "Varnak," it began, "we've seen the power of your fleet, but what you don't know is that we've been holding back. You've disabled our forces, but we have something far worse waiting for you. If you do not accept our terms, we will activate it." The message was sent. Dr. Cross sat back, her heart pounding in her chest. The world held its breath. Would the Zarthans believe the bluff, or would they call it and destroy Earth in retaliation? Hours passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Then the response came. The Zarthan transmission appeared on the screen. Varnak's face was once again visible, but this time there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "We have received your message," Varnak said, his voice a little more cautious than before. "We will consider your offer, but know this, if you are lying, there will be no place on Earth left for you to hide. We will destroy your world and every living thing on it." The message ended abruptly. Varnak was no longer on screen, but the tension in the room remained thick. Dr. Cross let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The bluff had worked. For now, they had bought themselves time. But how much time? And when the Zarthans discovered the truth, would Earth still be ready? The Zarthan counterattack. The fragile calm that had settled over the world after the bluff began to unravel faster than anyone anticipated. For a brief moment, it seemed like humanity had outsmarted the Zarthans. The alien leader, Varnock, had hesitated. He'd listened, and it appeared he'd been fooled by the decoy weapon. But deep down, Dr. Elena Cross knew that the Zarthans didn't bluff. Varnock had only paused to assess his next move. She had hoped for more time. Time to prepare for what was coming next. Time to finish the final phase of Project Inferno, the one that would truly give humanity a fighting chance. But in the back of her mind, she knew it was unlikely they would get that luxury. The Zarthans were coming. They were patient, but they were also ruthless. It didn't take long for her fears to come true. Across the world, military radar systems suddenly lit up with alarming readings. The Zarthan ships were regrouping, rising from their scattered positions in Earth's orbit. The powerful warships, now partially disabled but still operational, began to converge on the planet. They were preparing for something much worse than before. "They're coming back," General Mark Harris said grimly, as he stared at the incoming data. "And they're angry." Dr. Cross's mind raced. The bluff had worked, but only for a brief moment. The Zarthans were playing their own game now. Their next move was coming fast, and humanity was running out of options. "They won't just stop and leave," Dr. Cross said, her voice quiet but certain. "They're coming to finish what they started." The communication console beeped urgently, signaling a new transmission. Dr. Cross's breath caught in her chest as Varnock's face once again appeared on the screen, his expression more menacing than before. "This is your final warning, Earthlings," Varnock's voice boomed, his eyes glowing with fury. "We have rebuilt our fleet. We have absorbed your pulse, and we have learned from it. Your planet will now pay the price for your defiance. Prepare to face complete annihilation." The transmission cut off. The Zarthans were not just retaliating. They were sending everything they had. The moment of hope had been brief, and now Earth stood at the precipice of destruction. General Harris clenched his fists. "We were wrong to think we could bluff them forever. It's over. We need to fight, and we need to fight now." But Dr. Cross knew better. The Zarthans weren't just coming back for revenge. They were coming to obliterate Earth's defenses. The military had mobilized, but they couldn't match the firepower of the Zarthan fleet. The few remaining fighters and weapon systems left on Earth were no match for the alien technology. Humanity's best chance was not in a full-on battle, but in finishing Project Inferno, the true weapon that could defeat the Zarthans once and for all. The only problem was that Project Inferno wasn't ready. They were still working on perfecting the final phase of the weapon, the one that would channel enough power to create a pulse strong enough to completely neutralize the Zarthan fleet, if they could get it operational before the alien ships arrived. As Earth's cities braced for the inevitable assault, Dr. Cross and her team rushed to the underground laboratory where Project Inferno was being completed. The room was filled with the hum of machines and the buzz of frantic workers. Jacob, the lead engineer, was poring over the final calculations on the large display board. "We're close," Jacob said, his voice shaky. "I think we've solved the power distribution problem, but it's not enough. The output will be massive. If it works, we'll fry their entire fleet. But if we overcharge it, we might fry the whole planet." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Dr. Cross bit her lip. They couldn't afford to fail now, not when everything was so close. They had only one shot at this. "How much time do we have?" Dr. Cross asked, her voice steady despite the pressure. 20 hours, Jacob said, looking at the clock. "Maybe less. The Zarthans are already in position." The urgency in the air was palpable. Humanity had to hope that Project Inferno would work. They couldn't fight the Zarthans on the ground. No army on Earth stood a chance against their firepower. But the electromagnetic pulse was their last hope. As Dr. Cross and her team worked feverishly to complete the weapon, reports from around the world painted a grim picture. The Zarthan ships were descending into Earth's atmosphere, their weapons already aimed at key military and civilian targets. The first blast from a Zarthan ship hit the Pacific Ocean, sending a shockwave that was felt on every continent. The world was under attack. In the command center, General Harris surveyed the incoming reports. "Their first wave is hitting coastal cities," he said. "It's a full-scale assault. We have no time left to prepare defenses." Dr. Cross clenched her fists. "We don't have a choice. We need to fire Project Inferno before they launch the next round of attacks. If we don't, we'll lose everything." The tension was suffocating. Every second counted. Humanity's survival rested on the success of a weapon that had never been fully tested, a weapon that could either save them or wipe out the entire planet in the process. Jacob stepped forward, his hands trembling as he prepared the final calculations. "It's ready. I'll activate it now." Dr. Cross looked at the monitor, her heart pounding. The weapon powered up, and the hum of energy filled the room. With every passing second, they came closer to their goal. But the Zarthans weren't waiting. Their fleet had already launched a second wave, and the countdown to humanity's destruction was well underway. Jacob's voice rang out in the quiet, breaking through the tension. "We got one shot at this. If it works, we might survive. If it doesn't..." Dr. Cross nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "Do it." In that moment, with the future of humanity hanging in the balance, the room fell silent as the power of Project Inferno surged toward the sky. Aimed at the incoming Zarthan fleet, the pulse was fired. Would it be enough to stop the Zarthans, or would the alien invaders wipe out Earth before humanity could complete its final stand? Humanity strikes back. The world held its breath. The hum of the massive electromagnetic pulse that powered Project Inferno was deafening, like a low growl that resonated through every part of the underground facility. Dr. Elena Cross stood at the control panel, her hands gripping the cold metal. Beside her, Jacob, the lead engineer, adjusted the final settings, his face taut with concentration. The countdown clock above the console ticked down the final seconds. "Are you sure the pulse will reach them?" General Mark Harris asked from across the room, his face drawn with fatigue. The military had thrown everything it had into the defense effort, but they were spread thin. The Zarthan ships were relentless, launching wave after wave of attacks against the planet's key cities. "We've calibrated it to maximum range," Dr. Cross said, her voice tight. "The pulse should affect everything in the fleet's radius. If it doesn't, we're out of options." The silence that followed was broken only by the whirring of machines and the occasional beeping of data as it was processed. The tension was suffocating. The Zarthans had already begun their second wave, devastating Earth's defenses and sending more destruction across the globe. The first attack had caused enormous damage. Coastal cities, military bases, and power stations were now little more than ruins. The Zarthans' weapons were too advanced, too powerful. But Project Inferno, this was humanity's final weapon. It was their last hope. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Now. Jacob pressed the button. With a deafening roar, the electromagnetic pulse shot into the sky, a brilliant surge of energy that streaked upward toward the stars. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, as though the Earth itself held its breath. Then the sky erupted with light. It wasn't just a flash of brilliance, it was as if the very air vibrated with the force of the pulse. The power shot out in a perfect arc, racing toward the distant Zarthan fleet. The pulse was designed to disable all electronic systems within its range, and as it reached the alien ships, a sudden and overwhelming shockwave rippled across space. The Zarthan ships, some of the most advanced technology ever created, shuddered violently. Lights flickered. Then, as if in slow motion, the first ship, the largest one, Varnok's flagship, began to tremble. Systems started to fail. Weapons powered down. Communication channels fell silent. It was working. "We've done it," Jacob shouted, a rare grin crossing his face. But the joy was short-lived. A second later, the alien fleet retaliated. A wave of powerful energy blasts rained down from the sky, aimed directly at the ground. The blast from the Zarthan flagship struck a military base in the Middle East, vaporizing everything in its path. The next blast tore through a European city, reducing it to rubble in an instant. The Zarthans were not retreating. They were angry. They had felt the power of Project Inferno, but it wasn't enough to stop them. "They're still coming," General Harris yelled, his voice rising in panic. The pulse didn't disable them completely. They're regaining control. Dr. Cross watched the monitors, her heart pounding. The Zarthan fleet was staggering but still functional. The pulse had worked to some extent, but the alien ship's advanced technology allowed them to rapidly recover from the EMP. The Zarthans weren't down for long. "We need to finish this," Dr. Cross said, her voice steady, but laced with urgency. "We can't afford another round of attacks." "Then we need another pulse," Jacob said, his voice sharp. "But we don't have the time to recalibrate. Unless we use the core directly. It's risky, but we can channel more power through the same network." "But it could overload," Dr. Cross warned. "If it backfires, we won't have a choice," Jacob interrupted. "It's the only way to guarantee a hit. We need to release everything we've got." Dr. Cross knew it was dangerous. If the core were to overload, the resulting pulse could destroy much more than the Zarthan fleet. It could tear apart Earth's electromagnetic infrastructure, plunging the world into complete darkness. But there was no time for second guesses. If they failed to strike back now, the Zarthans would wipe out what was left of humanity. "I'll make the call," Dr. Cross said firmly, pushing her doubts aside. "We'll take the risk." The room worked in a blur of frantic energy as Jacob adjusted the system to reroute the power. The tension was thick, every second feeling like an eternity. Dr. Cross looked up at the map of the world on the screen, the blinking lights showing the Zarthan fleet as it moved closer to Earth's cities. The pressure was unbearable. This was it. Jacob pulled the lever that would channel the core's full power into the pulse. Activating now. For a moment, the ground shook beneath their feet, and the air hummed with raw power. The room dimmed as the energy from Project Inferno surged once more. Dr. Cross held her breath, watching the blueprints of the final shot unfold on the screen. This was humanity's last chance. The pulse fired. The sky split open with a crack of blinding energy. The waves shot through the atmosphere with a force that seemed to shake the stars themselves. Every living thing on Earth felt it, from the deepest ocean trenches to the highest mountains. The Zarthan fleet, now well within range, was caught in the pulse's wake. Their power flickered out. For a moment, nothing happened. The fleet seemed to freeze, suspended in the silence of space. Then, one by one, the ships began to fall. They fell like broken stars, their engines sputtering and flickering out. The once mighty warships crashed down, one after another, into the oceans, the deserts, the wilderness. The Zarthans had been defeated, finally. The world erupted in a wave of cheers. People poured into the streets, crying tears of relief. For the first time in days, Earth felt safe again. But as the adrenaline of victory surged, Dr. Cross felt the weight of the cost. The electromagnetic pulse had not just disabled the Zarthans, it had also crippled much of Earth's infrastructure. Cities were dark. Communications were down. The pulse had disabled much of Earth's technology, and now humanity faced the task of rebuilding again. "Did we win?" Jacob asked, his voice exhausted, but hopeful. "We've won," Dr. Cross said quietly, looking out at the horizon. But even as the cheers echoed in the background, she knew the victory was bittersweet. This war was far from over. The Zarthans were only one enemy, and there would be more, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance. Humanity had survived the first battle, But the real fight for the future had only just begun. The aftermath. The air was thick with smoke and dust. Earth had survived the final strike, but the world was far from unscathed. As the last of the Zarthan fleet crashed to Earth's surface, the celebration that followed was mixed with exhaustion and uncertainty. People cheered in the streets, but deep inside, they knew the victory came at a heavy price. Cities lay in ruins, power grids were shattered, and entire nations had been brought to the brink of collapse. Dr. Elena Cross stood in the heart of the underground facility, watching as teams of engineers, soldiers, and scientists worked around the clock to assess the damage. Her mind raced, not just with the recent victory, but with the bitter reality that humanity's survival had come at the cost of so much. The Zarthan fleet had been disabled, but the planet was reeling from the EMP's effects. Entire continents were plunged into darkness, communications were severed, and critical infrastructure had been destroyed. "Is it really over?" General Mark Harris asked, stepping up beside her. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. The strain of the battle had taken its toll on everyone. Dr. Cross turned to him, her expression tired but determined. "It's over for now. The Zarthans have been stopped, but they'll come back. We've barely scratched the surface of their technology. This battle isn't the end. It's just the beginning." General Harris nodded, his mind already shifting to the future. "We got a world to rebuild. The Zarthans might be gone for now, but there will be others. And next time, we won't be so lucky if we're not better prepared." As the days passed, Earth's governments worked together to start the long process of recovery. People were starting to return to their homes, though many places were still too dangerous to inhabit. Emergency teams were dispatched to help clear debris and provide aid to the most devastated areas. It felt like a race against time, not just to rebuild, but to ensure that humanity wouldn't be caught unprepared again. But there were whispers in the shadows, rumors of something more. As the world recovered, strange signals started appearing on communication channels. They were faint, almost imperceptible at first, but gradually grew clearer. Unexplained signals, too organized to be random, suggested that the Zarthans weren't the only alien species watching Earth. In the midst of all the recovery, Dr. Cross continued her work. She returned to the underground lab where Project Inferno had been created, now repurposed as a research facility to study alien technology. The Zarthans had left behind more than just broken ships. Their technology held secrets that could change the world, or destroy it. "Elena, you need to see this," Jacob called, his voice tense. She hurried to his station, her heart pounding. Jacob pointed at the screen, which showed a series of encrypted data patterns, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The signals were coming from deep space. "We've been tracking them for days," Jacob said, his fingers hovering over the keys. "They're not Zarthans, but they're connected. Whoever they are, they're out there, and they know we exist." Dr. Cross stared at the screen, her mind racing. The signals were definitely deliberate, and they were getting stronger. The Zarthans had been just the first wave. And now, the real threat was beginning to reveal itself. "We've won this fight," she said softly. "But I don't think the war is over. The universe is vast, and Earth has just drawn its first blood. But now they know we're capable of defending ourselves. The next enemy will be smarter, stronger." Jacob's face darkened. "We're not ready for that. We barely survived the Zarthans. What if they bring an army?" Dr. Cross took a deep breath. "Then we'll have to be ready. Humanity has always been underestimated, but we've shown we can rise to the occasion. We'll find a way to build even better defenses. We'll learn from the Zarthans and prepare for whatever comes next." Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alert on the console. A live video feed appeared, showing a small group of Zarthan survivors. They were captured, and their faces showed a mix of defiance and fear. One of them stepped forward, his voice rasping but clear. "You may have won this battle, Earthlings," the Zarthan said. "But know this, The Zarthan Empire does not forget. You will be hunted. We will return with more ships, more soldiers. And when we do, you will regret the day you defied us. The message ended, and the transmission flickered out. For a moment, no one spoke. Dr. Cross stood up, her mind made up. The Zarthans are right about one thing. We will be hunted, but we'll fight. And when we fight, we will win. General Harris nodded, looking out at the horizon from the command center. We've won the first round, but the war is far from over. It's time to prepare for the future. Humanity was scared, but not broken. The Zarthans had underestimated them, and now Earth had proven that it would not go down without a fight. In the months that followed, Earth began to rebuild, not just its cities, but its defenses. Dr. Cross led the charge to understand alien technology, studying what the Zarthans had left behind. The research was slow and dangerous, but humanity was adapting. The remnants of Project Inferno were incorporated into new systems, and what was once a weapon of survival became the foundation for Earth's defense network. But even as Earth's strength grew, Dr. Cross couldn't shake the feeling that something more dangerous was out there, waiting. The signals from deep space continued to grow stronger, and a new chapter in humanity's story was unfolding. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a long war, one that would determine the fate of Earth and its place in the vast, unknown universe. Humanity had survived its first alien encounter, but what would the next chapter look like? Only time would tell.